Got it.
Anyone have any exciting experiences for the 4th of July?
Yeah, we were in the Sully, Iowa. Well, we went and saw the Sully, Iowa Fourth of July parade, which had many tractors and a couple that had been. It was their 70th anniversary, and they had 10 great grandchildren in a float. Anything else?
And a water fight
Oh, there
with
was a
fire
great.
hoses for the kids.
Yep, really excellent water fight. Then we went to the was it the Lions Club served us brisket. Yeah, it was good. It was not like Contra Costa County.
Well,
Very small town.
Iowa has never sounded so enticing as it has in your stories.
Yeah, we like Iowa. It's we've really had a great time. Now we're in Chicago.
Uh-oh, we did just have a slight breakup for you, Rodney. I
Anybody
know you have a
else?
presentation for us. We might need you to, if we have further turbulence, we might turn off video and maybe that'll allow the audio to pipe in nicely.
Okay, I just
Rodney,
turned
can
off
we
my
get a sound
video.
check?
I just turned off my video. Is that better?
Yes, it is. It sounds good.
Okay, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
And apologies for any kind of hiccups due to low bandwidth.
We paid for the fancy bandwidth, so fingers crossed.
Well, we want to do all we can to make sure your investment's worthwhile. Thank you. Okay, well, with that, I think that we should get started if you're ready, Rodney. Just want to welcome everybody here to the working group. Thanks so much for joining us again. We are recording the meeting for record keeping purposes, and we have some exciting developments in the interim between last meeting and this meeting. As far as I know, we are going to really focus our agenda on Rodney's report based on the great work of the working group, going out door to door, laying shoe leather, and meeting friends, neighbors, and colleagues. So with that, maybe we should go straight into Rodney, your report on talking to the adjacent or abutting property owners.
Yeah, and I'm giving this report, but it's really the work of our subcommittee going to all the homes along the paths that has gotten us this information. So, and I also want to thank Sarah for putting the PowerPoint presentation together. Do one thing here so I can see my screen. So, just to review, we picked the following 5 paths to do the outreach on, based on the level of use and their condition. So I just want to say, if there's any problem with my audio, please somebody let me know. So I'll do my best to work around any audio problems.
So far, so good, Rodney. Thank you.
Great. And so we were able to get 30 people to submit surveys. It's about 56%. In my email that I sent yesterday, undercounted it. We actually were a little more tthan I said. On the Willamette path is at 50%. We'll take a look at that in a second. So of the 30 respondents, 80% of them are owners, and the vast majority want to learn more about public acquisition of the paths. And they also told us that email is a really good way to contact them. So this is kind of, and this is based on not just the submissions, but per address. So we counted a total of 45 addresses along these paths, abutting these paths, and we were able to get at least 50% response to our survey from all of them. And then for Ardmore, we got 75% for a total of like 57%. Which is a pretty strong response rate. And we still think there are some more people that we will get responses from. We just haven't gotten them yet. So they expressed, and I can email out to the group the full set of the questions and concerns they had. We thought it would be better to summarize them first, and then I can send that to you guys to see in their totality. But there were a lot of questions about what county ownership would mean. They want guarantees that the county wouldn't close the paths. They want to know which county agency would take it on. Um, and like how would it affect property taxes? I think some of them meant by that, would they have higher property taxes because they were abutting neighbors? But I think everybody wants to know, even just like what the impact would be if it's spread out among all the Kensington residents. What's the impact? And then they would like to be able to do Q&A with the county decision makers. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We had some questions about the vegetation on the paths. Like one person, they are growing roses over one of the paths, and they don't want that to be curtailed. And then how does it impact existing landscaping? What will their responsibilities and what will be required of them as homeowners abutting these paths? People wanted to know about encroachment, and I know we've already talked about this as a group. Will their encroachment be something that gets grandfathered in? Is there going to be some kind of process for dealing with that? And these are questions they raised. We didn't want to go out on a limb and answer these. We don't think it's appropriate. So we'll get to how we deal with these things next. They want to know about maintenance. Is it going to be tailored for each of the paths, or is it going to be a one-size-fit-all approach? And people want the paths to be neat and tidy and part of the community. One person in particular said they're not willing to pay any money for this endeavor. I'm not sure if they're meaning them in particular, or if would they be against doing it as part of the entire Kensington. And those are things we maybe need to drill down on with these people. And then someone asked, what are the unintended consequences? Which I find an interesting question, since we don't really know what the unintended consequences are. What are the risks and the downsides? So really, next steps would be outreach to the neighbors, like some kind of committee or full committee meeting with these neighbors to talk about their concerns. And of the people who said they wanted to do a meeting, the majority of them said they would prefer a weekday evening, but we also had a number of people, 8 people, who said weekends. And so I think we're thinking maybe we want to do one of each. There were a few people who said they preferred weekday mornings and afternoons, but most people said evenings. I think that would be what we'd suggest doing. So that's kind of where we want to talk to you guys in the county. Should we be going ahead and maybe setting up some meetings where we could have you guys involved with our discussions with these residents?
Okay, thank you so much, Rodney. I want to hand this over in just a moment, but an upshot here is we got a lot of positive feedback. That was first and foremost, we got to really thank everybody who did this work, Rodney, Sarah, and everyone else. Thanks so much. A lot of gratitude. That's a lot. And obviously you did well with positive feedback, and probably most importantly, nothing in the way of poison pills or completely intransigent homeowners that vow to die on a hill rather than see us meet our goals. So that is all pretty encouraging, at least in my mind. So with that, who should we have jump in first? Jocelyn, do you have thoughts? Or Larry or Jason, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you actually got more than 50% of a response, given the times and people are probably going on vacations. I do have concerns, on the questions that they came about, that I think there's going to be a lot of work for our staff as well as our consultants to look into and answer before we even dive in. So if we can get a copy of those, right, because it's talking about ownership, maintenance, and I think we have to discuss amongst ourselves, like, what does that mean? is this really for the county to take on, or is that the appropriate or the right, or is it another entity, like a district? So I think those, starting getting the questions, that would be great, sent to me, Jason and Larry, and then we can tackle those.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Excellent points. We saw an assent in the affirmative from Rodney on that.
Yes.
Jason, Larry, more analysis, please.
I'll go ahead and jump in. This is Larry. I apologize. My video is not quite working right now, so I'm just audio. Hopefully you can hear me fine.
Yes, we can.
Rodney, I just had some general questions that may help, determine the next steps. And this could be for the group too, obviously. There were a lot of good questions, a lot of common questions I would anticipate. Were you able to glean from the surveys, the interactions that folks were, it's hard to say, but did you still feel like it was generally positive and they were asking questions on, how can we make it work? Or, they might not say we absolutely don't want it. I get that. That's good not to hear, but did you feel like any real, like, this is a big concern for us, specific things like, the encroachments, I could see like someone's got something they've already put out there that's really important. Did you feel any of those particular issues so we know what to look for and where to look for it?
Yeah, Larry, it was generally very positive.
Good.
We ran into, there's a couple of people who kind of stood out as kind of problematic. We had one
Okay.
person who said, PG&E owns the paths, and it's ridiculous to be doing anything like we're doing because she knows for a fact that PG&E owns the paths. And I said, well, if we were able to show that actually PG&E doesn't own the paths, what would you think then? And she said, you're not listening to me. PG&E owns the paths.
Okay.
So she was like convinced of that. We think like she'd probably lay low. She probably wouldn't be involved.
Okay.
That's strikes me as a little bit of a not rational response to
Yeah.
all this. So that was one person. We had a second person who just said they don't trust government in general,
Okay.
and they don't think that government being involved in this is going to be a good solution. But again,
Sorry,
I'm
it sounds like
sorry, Rodney,
Rodney
we
had a
lost
little
you.
bit of connection issue.
We lost
Um,
your audio, but I think to summarize, what Rodney's saying is that amongst his whole survey,
yeah,
he
I'm
had-
back now.
Go ahead, Rodney. Go ahead.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You see this red? This means it's bad. Can you guys hear me now?
we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I think we had these two people who just generally they strike me as people who don't really, I don't know what the word, they're skeptical of government, or there maybe be some conspiracy thinking. I just wonder if they would really be involved in the process. We would
Agree.
want to keep our
Understood.
eyes open.
Okay.
That's kind of where, but we talked to a lot of other people who were very encouraging. They were happy this was happening, and they just seemed very open to hearing more.
Okay. So I think, this is good feedback and understanding the sort of tenor of the community. And, this group obviously that's meeting here is obviously very involved in the path, are very supportive. So I'm wondering did you get a sense from folks out there that the status quo of, these paths, how they are, even though they're not perfect, there's no real true maintenance entity, all these did people feel like there is something lacking and it would be good, or did they feel like what's out there is good and don't touch it, even though it might not be like the government person, but um, did you get a sense of how much the community valued it? I mean, I understand you're talking to the people right next to the path, so it's not the whole community, but I'm just curious. These folks are going to be probably the most impacted, so it's kind of good to know where they stand on it. And it's a lot of nuance. I understand that, so it's not going to bear out perfectly, but I'm trying to gain a little bit of more information.
Yeah, it's a good question, Larry. I think nobody said to us, you shouldn't be doing this. This isn't necessary. They understood why we were doing what we
Okay.
were doing. And then the majority of them were encouraging and thanking us for doing it. I think that's
Okay.
true.
That's good.
Anyone on the subcommittee who wants to jump in and, if you want to, from your experience, either validate what I'm saying or, if you think I'm overstating it. But Lisa Corona and I went out on to the Ardmore properties and had really good conversations with people. People invited us in their homes.
Well, that's nice.
They understood why we were doing it. And that's a path that does get a lot of use.
Uh-huh.
And I think they're generally favorable. They generally like the fact that their path gets used. And yeah, so I think we need to keep our eyes open. I don't want to, I'm not trying to paint, an overly optimistic picture.
I'll say
All right.
that I'll say that I had a pretty enthusiastic response to the people I talked to on Belite Path. And some people commented that they use the paths every day and they're liking the ideas of that we're proposing of taking ownership of the paths and making improvements over time. So I heard generally very favorable responses.
That's good.
Denise, maybe you can comment on Coventry and Stratford.
Yes, so Sarah and I talked with the homeowners. We made contact with all but one. And I would say for the most part, they were all interested, curious about what was going on. I think we have a couple on the Stratford path that are one woman who is very elderly and I don't think is really able to participate. Then there were two that seemed very interested, and then there was another one that was very elderly that we talked to and didn't seem to really understand why we're doing this. So you've got a mixed bag on Stratford. On Coventry, we've got two people for sure that are very supportive, and we've got one that I'm surprised didn't respond, but I don't know. I did follow up a few times, but maybe they were gone for the holiday weekend because didn't get a response from them. And then there is one neighbor down there that really, again, doesn't interact with anyone. So I think, it's just, we got the response that we were expecting, I would say. If I had to take a guess at who did respond and who didn't, I would say we got it. But for the people we did talk to, it was positive.
That's good information. I think it's obvious the nuance here, and to a certain degree, the devil's in the details, obviously. And I think when people, if it's some kind of assessment involved and a cost, that obviously changes the discussion. And we're just scratching the surface right now. But this is very good outreach. I appreciate the neighborhood doing this. It more than anything, it gets these folks understanding that there's a discussion going on, so it's not completely out of left field when there's a community meeting or something like that. And they've had they also recognize that there's groups out there that value these paths, who are spending the time and volunteering to do this. That it's a lot of times we get a question of like, who wants this, right? And clearly you guys are more organized than other folks that we've seen in other communities. But Um, I think what Jocelyn mentioned is Jason and I need to sit down with the county staff and go through the questions, and if we could see sort of more of the raw data, that would help. Maybe we can you know, glean any other, you know, sticky issues. And we do need to probably start developing some basic positions on how this would be done. I think we're kind of at a crossroads on what the next step is, and I wanted to ask the group, you know, what their thoughts are. Is I think clearly, you know, another community meeting is important. You guys have already kind of outreached and, you know, got some feedback on, you know, what day of the week and that sort of stuff. But we could spend a little bit of time doing design and doing some sort of conceptual work first and then have the meeting, or we could approach it as, you know, we're still talking about it on sort of, you know, as a concept, but not having spent time surveying, looking at all the, you know, is there encroachments, this or that. And it's kind of a chicken or the egg approach. Like some people like, oh, why did we have this meeting if you don't have the details? And the others like, you've already designed it and it freaks people out. So it would be good to get your group's feedback as to either way. I think is fine. But what the next step is, because obviously holding a meeting without doing the design, you know, we're not investing a lot of money yet in terms of the design, but at some point we will have to. But that would be good feedback for us as a consultant, and you know what the next steps are. So I don't know, Rodney, what your thoughts are, and maybe the group as a whole.
The data is in a spreadsheet on Google Sheets, and I can just share that with you. It's going to be it's got columns for all the responses. So I'll just give you all the data that we have.
Excellent.
I'll just call. There was one comment from somebody who just said, put in their county ownership with a bunch of question marks after it, and we didn't really know what she meant by that. And so we want to go back to her and drill down on, and you know, so some things are going to be a little hard to interpret. But I think that would be a good next step is for you guys just to look at all that and get a sense of like what we would do to respond to these questions.
Rodney, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, sorry, I don't know how to. I don't know how to raise my hand. Thanks. You know, one thing I was thinking, since you know we did get 50%, which is really great. You know, but that's 50%. You know, and I think that I was thinking that perhaps a letter, perhaps this time from the county, that we could help craft, just saying like this, you know, we're studying this, you know, it seems like there's a positive response. We're very interested in hearing from everybody, you know, like something that's a little more official now that we've kind of done our initial outreach. You might pick up some of the owners, because on Ardmore, there were 2 owners that we did not reach. We did reach the tenants, but the owners we have not reached quite yet. So, you know, I don't know if there's kind of an interim step here that has a little more of an official ring to it that will kind of let people know this is actually something that could be happening. That was just one thought that I kind of been rumbling around. The other thought is, I think before or maybe with the county looking at these standards that, you know, you feel are important to achieve on these paths, that maybe we could have a discussion on, you know, what that might look like. I mean, we've talked about different techniques of solving these problems in terms of the kind of construction that's used. But I don't know if there's an opportunity for us all to kind of hash that out a little bit before, like there's some scheme to like do some really dramatic improvements that people might scare people. So That's just a thought I had. Those are my initial thoughts. Thank you.
This Dave Spath, I don't know how to raise my hand either. A couple thoughts here. Jocelyn mentioned that it's not clear if the county would take ownership or you'd create a special district. Before you have a meeting with, or even send a letter, it strikes me that that decision sort of has to be made. If you're going to go to the residents, I think you need to decide whether the county is going to take over the paths and ownership so that they clearly understand that that is going to be the case. And actually, I think it's better to have sort of a general meeting first if you decide that the county is going to take ownership, and then sort of what that means. And to Lisa's point, whether there are going to be criteria that will apply to every path, because I know I did the Willamette path, of which there are 16 residents, and there were a few of them that were concerned about encroachment issues and whether they would be required to cut back on vegetation that they already have there, significant vegetation for that matter. And of course, and the one guy on the path who doesn't trust government at all was one of the individuals I spoke to. And it wasn't that his issue was he doesn't feel government follows through on issues. That was his real point. So anyways, I think we need to have an understanding of if there's going to be county ownership and some of these other factors before you have a meeting with these residents.
So in general, it's sounding like before we do a lot more design, we should obviously have a discussion internally with the county. I think that's the next big step. But after that, would having a community meeting before we do design be the consensus among the group?
No.
I guess my feeling is we'd want to know more about what that meeting looks like. In general, I do think like something in which we're all talking to these residents would be a positive step forward.
Like Lisa said, what standard?
Yeah, and this question about what standard would we want to achieve with the various paths, I think that's an important question that we don't, our subcommittee doesn't really know the answer to that.
Understood. I agree with that. I think honestly, I think your group has taken it as far as it can probably go by itself. And, I think that the next steps do involve more direct involvement from, the county and us as the consultant. So, I think I just want to make sure we're kind of on the same page of what step we want to take. Maybe even before we schedule a meeting, would you like as a group to have a discussion of sort of what the county position would be or approach would be, so internally before we hold the meeting? So maybe we schedule this meeting again in 3 weeks or so, and follow up at, hey, we've sat down with the county, this is where the outline of what we think would be the steps to take, and then run that by the group here.
Yeah, that does sound like that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea too. Oh, sorry, Larry. I was just thinking, while you were talking, I think it's a good idea to have a kind of a preliminary meeting, like we're kind of talking about, just to kind of go over some of the basic things that we know we can say. And certainly the county is going to have a lot of opinions on that. But before we get into design, it might be also good to just get into more like vision board kind of stuff like this. These are kind of some of the solutions that, other communities have used, or, like we could see this on certain paths, we could see this on other paths, somehow give some visuals into the future without necessarily designing, with all the criteria that you need for the encroachment issues and all that other stuff.
Okay.
Just
I
an
was
idea.
thinking, along the same lines of maybe we start with what I'll call a walking survey, walking through some of these paths, taking photos, identifying some of the issues that may be already presented by these residents' encroachments, and then we talk about this particular encroachment could be a problem. This one probably needs to get pulled because of whatever reason, right? And so we know that this one could be a potential issue. Where another one says, yeah, I think these folks' whatever minor landscaping is probably fine, and we get that addressed. Which probably leads me to my next question: is do we want to look at all 5 of these named paths, or do we want to start with one and work off of that one and maybe build a good model? And I'm probably suggesting it that way is just so we're doing sort of 1/5 of the work initially to get this thing moved forward, and then we'd also learn from that process that we could follow up with the other paths. So I don't know if the group's sort of prepared to look at, say, hey, this is the one we'd like to start out with, or is it more still the thought of let's look at all 5 and look at all the situations? I think it's just a matter of approach. I don't think there's a wrong answer or a right answer to this.
So Larry, that's a great question. And I could tell you what I think the answer is, but I'm not going to because I represent a subcommittee. And I think our subcommittee needs to meet and discuss that question and get back to you. We could do that soon.
Great.
But I don't want to answer that right now. And, I want to hear everyone else's voice on this.
No, I think that's a very, very good measured approach. What might be good in terms of the steps are, I think we can look conceptually at all these issues, ownership and, maintenance, response, all those things in concept with the county. We could start that discussion with Jocelyn and the other departments, probably the real property department as well. If you could, have your subcommittee meeting and say, like you said, if it's in the next couple of weeks, you could identify as a group what sort of would be the highest priority path would be. Then in a couple of weeks, we could do a walking survey of that path and use that as kind of the initial example of, here's the issues we would see on a typical path, but here's one in real life that, would be a good starting point.
A quick question, have we already established that the highest priority path is Ardmore?
Yes.
Well, yes, but I mean, no. I mean, I want to make sure everyone else agree. I see it that.
Rodney is
I'm sorry,
breaking up.
Rodney, you broke up, but it sounded like you said yes, kind of, but I don't want to say that without the consensus of the group.
So initially we had our top 3 and then we added 2 more to it because we thought we wanted to see what kind of response we got. So in our top 3 that we agreed to initially, and anyone can jump in and correct me, but it was Beloit, Ardmore, and Coventry. So I think it's between those 3 that the subcommittee, come to a consensus and decide which one. Does everybody remember that? Those were our original top 3?
I do remember it that way, but I also think that I also remember that there was a top of the top 3. Was Ardmore at the top or no?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
I'll just jump in here, even though we haven't had our committee meeting. I would like to see a walkthrough done on two paths. One that's a hard surface path and one that's what I'll call a soft surface path, like Beloit path. So we have the full range of sort of some of the issues related to two very different types of construction. That's my 2 cents.
I think that's a good suggestion, because yes, the hardscape paths are going to have much different issues than one that's just a dirt path or needs to be upgraded, right? So I think two paths would be fine as well.
I agree with that approach.
I agree too.
Denise?
I also agree.
Yep, and I'm back. That makes sense to me.
Rodney and Sarah both
Rodney and Sarah.
agree.
I think the undeveloped, the path that is not, that is just ground should also be one that shows encroachment. So the county has a sense of what the encroachment looks like with regard to that type of path. And maybe Beloit path has enough of that to get a sense of what they would be looking at.
Yeah, Beloit Path definitely has a good stretch that's like that.
Without saying confirming it, would Ardmore and Beloit be the two that you would likely propose as being the two to start off with as a group?
That makes sense to me.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Do you still want to have your subcommittee meeting, or is that something that you feel all comfortable that between those two, we could focus on those without further direction?
That sounds good. The one person I haven't heard from is Danielle, who I know she doesn't have a great connection. Maybe Danielle, if you could put your thoughts in chat.
Actually, I'm fine with both of those.
I think we have a
While we're
consensus.
doing that, everyone, Supervisor Joya has joined us. Do we want to bring him up to speed briefly?
No, I get the report. I don't want to get away from the flow from your meeting. Robert can handle this and you're all doing the work. So I'm just checking in.
We'll just give you a high level, John. You just wanted to say that we did reach more than 50% of neighbors abutting the paths. It's like 57%. And, it's generally very favorable. A few people had some kind of off the wall comments or skepticism about government, but, not clear that they would be intransigent. That's kind of the headline, I guess.
And
Great.
now we
Thank
are
you.
we're homing in on Ardmore and Benoit, right? And that I think that Larry and county staff are thinking about a deeper analysis of those two stretches. And we're wondering about the order of the next meeting. We need to have a county internal meeting. We need to have a community meeting. We need to have a working group meeting. And I think we're trying to work through those issues now. But for the last few minutes, we've really been focused on, the high priority paths and investing more analysis into them.
Right. Yeah. No, this is the whole purpose of this. I'm glad you're having this discussion, and I figured that's what you're going to prioritize. Because I think, right, you want county staff and its team focusing on a limited number of paths, which are the ones that have the greatest chance of success.
Yeah, I think what we plan on doing is, we've been generally meeting once a month. So we'll schedule another meeting in about a month or 3 weeks. In the meantime, Jason and I will work with county staff on looking at the general issues and the concepts that probably need to be addressed for any of these paths. But we will also do a walking survey, basically taking pictures, identifying issues along the Ardmore and Beloit paths to then bring this back to this group again in about a month to discuss, what the county's position probably will be on maintenance or ownership. So the group is all aware, and obviously the group can provide their feedback. And then we would look to schedule a community meeting. Now, we could start, community meetings, a lot of times need to be scheduled out ahead of time. We could try to schedule it maybe 2 weeks after the next internal meeting of this group, and get it on the books. Or we could wait till we have that meeting and then schedule it. I think either option is fine. It's just a matter of timeline and how much lead time we want to have. So I would say if we want to have that community meeting at this point, probably mid-August, late August. Probably good for us to all look at our calendars and get it kind of lined up and figure out a space where we're going to meet. Those elements.
Can I suggest?
So what are you trying to get out of this, the community meeting? Let me understand. I mean, I always feel we want to go to the community when we're most prepared to go. So what is it that you're trying to get out of the community meeting?
I think after we meet internally again with the group, the thought was before we go into more specific design, that we would try to answer some of the questions that have come up in this survey, give outreach to the community that this is being not only discussed, but now moving forward to a potential conceptual design, and give people opportunity to provide more input and hear the feedback on the county's position.
And when you say the community, you're referring broader or to the people who live along the path?
I would suggest that you probably outreach directly to the people that live along the path, but you also let the community know in general, either through your newsletters or next door, that this meeting is available. But maybe doing more direct outreach to those, the property owners along the path, so they're well aware of it and they've been sort of more personally invited. You can do it separately if you feel like the property owners want to have sort of their own, adjacent property owners want to have their own meeting ahead of the general community. But I don't think anyone would stop anyone who doesn't live along the path to come in this meeting, and especially since I'm assuming a lot of the Pathkeepers here aren't necessarily the property owners along these paths that they would want to attend as well. So
here's my sense is, Rodney, remind me, how many paths did you identify in the top group to pursue?
5.
3.
Well, 3. We were going to pick 3 of the 5.
So you have three of the 5. So ultimately, remember, I always look at the end game. The end game is to get a measure passed to create funding to do capital improvements and maintenance for a set number of paths. How many when you say 3, is the idea that that's the only number, that is the number of paths that we would seek funding for, or is the goal to seek funding for more?
Probably for more. We thought we would, we want to look at some paths initially just to get started. But ultimately, I think we want to get as many paths covered as possible. It's just that
Right.
we thought it would take time to some of them.
And
are gonna take longer.
what is going to be the scope of analysis for these 3? What level of detail? And I don't know, someone can respond to that. What's the level of detail?
I would say, Supervisor Joya, that the level of detail for the 3 eventually would be, a conceptual or a design that gives you a cost estimate. I don't know when you would complete all that, depending on, the outreach to the community. That's a timing issue, but ultimately, you would need to have a preliminary design that has a good engineer's estimate that you could develop sort of an assessment level report, on not only the capital cost to build the improvements, but then also look at maintenance costs.
Yeah, but you're making this sound a lot like a public works project. So I'm trying to understand. I thought that really the idea was to do, these paths are not going to be necessarily concrete structures. They're going to be path with other materials. So are you talking about that type of construction? And when you say design, I mean, I want to make sure the path group is working with Public Works and that in tandem about how you're designing something, because we're like looking for we're not looking for these to be concrete paths necessarily.
And I'm not suggesting that they all be concrete paths either. I think some level of improvements need to be done. What level that is dependent on, the community, the stakeholder group here. I didn't anticipate all of these paths having, like a perfect ADA situation or anything like that. So I do anticipate that there need to be some kind of capital cost. I don't believe it's millions of dollars, hopefully, but depending on the level, we're willing to work with.
And if you're picking 3, you can start work on 3, but I thought, so these 3, you're confident have pretty good support of the adjoining property owners.
They have questions, so we need to. We just thought they were generally positive. Didn't see anybody who seemed intrinsically opposed, but they want more information before they get on board.
Right. So why I'm not certain we're at a point where we need to do a big community update. I mean, I think we may need to do more work and put together more information. That right now you're just. I do think it makes sense to go and have an update to the community about the work of the Paths group and to let people know what you're doing. August is not a good month because a lot of people are out of town. It's way better, I think, to wait till the school year starts in September. Because I always look at what are we trying to achieve, right? We're trying to build public confidence in this process and the work that you're all doing. We want to have some level of information and what you continue to do. I'm not certain you're at a point where we need to go to the community and just say we're going to study these 3. There's a lot. I think there's more things that can happen. I mean, I think now the folk. It's almost
also want to point out that.
Yeah.
Oh, just wanted to say KIC is having a town hall in October. That could be a good opportunity to update the community.
I think that's a better chance. I think at the town hall meeting that maybe KIC is doing to devote some of the town hall to an update about the Paths group and what's happened in October. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And we can all be there and we could present an update in October. And that I almost think putting together a small gathering of the adjoining property owners may make some sense, at the right time separately is, hey, do a little, maybe one of the adjoining property owners, we work with them and does a barbecue in their yard and invites the adjoining property owners from these other neighborhood paths to come, and we have an informal kind of, that's how I would see it. Like that way there's some informal discussions that are happening with them and an update with them. What do you think of that? That could be done before October, maybe in September, where it's with the specific property owners who live adjacent to these identified 5 paths, let's say.
I think that's I like that idea. I want to talk with my group about it.
Yeah, that's my suggestion. Is do it like a adjoining neighbors only barbecue community event at wherever, at someone who's really supportive said, hey, I'll just host everybody in my yard. We all get together, make it more informal, a little presentation, have the right people there to talk about what we're doing. So they feel inclusive and part of it, and then do an update in October to KIC.
I like that idea a lot. As being one of the Pathkeepers who lives on a path, on Belay Path, that'd be
You can host it. You can
a
host
great
it, Mark,
idea.
right? You would
Yeah,
host it.
we're hosting a Tour de France party this weekend, and it would just be it's a good warm-up exercise for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that'd be, then it's like a real informal, they're all there, we're talking with them. I don't think we need to have a big community meeting yet, and then KIC can do an update. I'm glad to participate in that, and members of this group, and say, hey, this is what we're doing so far, and this is where we're at.
I think that works. I think the next timeline situation for us, I guess, would be we're going to come back to meet with this group. We'll talk internally with the county staff, discuss some of the the positions that would be related to ownership of the path and maintenance. Bring it back to this group. We would do our walking survey. I'm assuming the two paths that we talked about, and that we would then host, or we would schedule with one of the adjoining property owners on the path a informal gathering of neighboring path property owners at a meeting maybe in September or late August timeframe. Does that sound consistent with what was discussed?
I'm sorry, so what's gonna happen in the late August, September timeframe?
The barbecue informal meeting.
Yeah, and that can be whenever you decide, whenever, since it's a smaller group, whenever you could get everybody, get folks to participate, and check with Robert and I on scheduling, because then we could go.
Okay. No, that sounds good. I think in that situation, I don't think we need to set that date until probably after our next get together, via Zoom like this, and hopefully we're all on the same page on what sort of the county's position, or if there's some questions we need to work those out still, then we have time before we meet as in an informal barbecue, is all I'll call it. So.
Great.
Okay.
Wonderful. Right on cue, should we set a meeting of this group in early August?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, are we able to consult our calendars now?
Yes. My preference is the week of August 8th.
Okay.
Pretty open for me.
John, are you able to see?
Wednesday may be the only day that works for me.
How about Wednesday, August 10th at 3 p.m.?
Sounds good to me.
Is there anyone for whom that can't work? Denise, you're on mute.
Sorry, no, I'm in Michigan that week and nowhere where I can call in, actually.
Sounds like it's a good trip then.
Yeah.
Do you think
Are you
we
in
should
the
proceed?
upper part of the state, that detached area?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere outside of Traverse City.
Well, it's funny. I know of someone who's from the Traverse City area, still goes up there. Yes, that's a nice area.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be enjoying the Upper Peninsula, right, Denise? Is there any reason why we shouldn't proceed with that meeting? Do you really need to be on that one, or?
No, please go ahead without me. That's
Okay.
We'll keep you apprised of our progress, Denise.
I'm good for that date too.
So 3 p.m. Wednesday, August 10th.
Right.
Okay. I will send an email shortly to everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Our bandwidth issue.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rodney and Sarah, especially.
Turn them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The president.
Yeah. Okay.